who gives a shit? Like, people who like Dune like to think about what it's like to drop acid and be eaten by a sandworm.
Hello and welcome to Expected Own Goals. Orlando is champions. Backstreet's back. All right. I'm your host, Eric Morgan.
I'm Evan Davis. Yeah. They've just won the NWSL championship. What are they going to do next? Do you think they're going to go to Disney World?
I feel like they should flip it up and get really inconvenient with their travel and go to Disneyland or Euro Disney.
Oh, yeah.
Or, just like, is it even special if you just live down the street from Disney World?
This is the first time a top-tier professional sports team from Orlando has won a championship.
That is, not that surprising because Orlando only has the Magic, the Pride, and Orlando City.
Do you count any NBA finals or MLS Cups in that group? I don't.
I count a Shaq and Penny Hardaway getting steamrolled by Houston, and I don't think Orlando City's ever gotten particularly close to the MLS championship game, though I believe they are still alive in the playoffs. And yes, they knocked off bottom seed Atlanta United. So the Wilfs may be having themselves quite a fall.
Indeed.
But let's focus on the first championship, the bag that they already have secured, and leave the Orlando City stuff to our compatriots over at ASA. Wow. Orlando runs the table.
First time since 2019 that's happened. Shield and Cup winner being the same team.
First non-North Carolina team to ever do it.
Only the third time in history that it's ever happened.
And they do so with an extra round of playoffs to boot.
The semifinals and the championship were probably played at a higher level than we've ever seen in this league.
This was maybe the hardest double to have ever pulled. And they did so while recording, an incredible 60 points.
Yeah, it's hard to apples that because they played two more games than North Carolina in 2018. But, I mean, North Carolina racked up 2.4 points per game that season. Orlando racked up 2.3. So They are one of the two best teams on results in league history.
Yeah. An impressive plus 26 goal differential, a league leading 20 goals conceded or co-leading with Gotham. And then they hit the playoffs and they had to play three really different styles of game to win this title. And we'll get into what the Washington style was in great depth, but let's just say against Chicago, they were flat track bullies and used overwhelming offensive and possession dominance or overwhelming field tilt dominance to obliterate probably one of the worst playoff teams this league has ever seen.
It's not a question. It's the worst. They are the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just waiting for you to say that. That's what I like. That's what I like to call me playing the long ball over Chicago's defense. You bandaing it into the goal. I know what I did when I played that ball, and I expected you to do what you did.
Yeah, very high X punditry here.
Yeah, the X punditry through the roof. And then they went and played a Kansas City team that I think may have been the best underlying team all season, and pretty much dominated them. Had the better tactical game plan and acquired a 3-1 lead very much through the quality of their play, and then just kind of sat back. And Kansas City clawed one back on a handball, but it was a consummate victory for Orlando in the semifinals, but one where they were attempting to contain Temwa Chewinga. They were attempting to contain all of what Kansas City could do. And I felt like in this game, we saw yet a third version of Orlando, certainly at least until the first goal is scored, where they were very much the physical aggressors, really putting tackles in, getting stuck in, if we're going to use a classic phrase, and setting essentially the tone and tempo of the game. Sort of from the jump, Orlando understood the game plan that they were going out with.
And listen, the first half, Barbra Banda's goal and then the Terre McKeown miss on the corner kick just before halftime. Besides those two chances, it really was a very compressed, very squeezed, very back and forth, but not in a fun way kind of game. And that suited Orlando very, very well.
You had Orlando correctly understand that with a slightly injured Trinity Rodman, that Kouassi was probably going to be the fulcrum of the offense, or at least the ball progressing dribbler. And Orlando's plan for that was to drop Ali Watt deeper, bring Emily Sams over to support Corey Dyke, and make sure that at all times there was somebody who could get a foot in, who could get a tackle on the first or second step Kouassi had the ball, and make sure she couldn't build up a head of steam to create any, to sort of provoke any Washington attack.
Yeah, and Kouassi quickly, or Kouassi, whether it was Kouassi or Jonathan Heraldez, whoever made the in-game decision, they very quickly realized that they were going to have to test both sides of Orlando's wing defense, because Kouassi and Rodman were pretty regularly switching sides. Whether, sometimes it would just be for 5 minutes, sometimes it'd be for 10 or 15, but they were trying to find a way through. And you could see how, especially in the first half, that Sam's job wasn't necessarily to like pull all the way over and try and get a tackle in closer to the touchline. She was holding her position and just trying to ensure that Kouassi wouldn't be able to make a cutting run inside or try and find a passing lane to somebody in the middle channel. And whereas it was Watt's job to just completely drop deep and work with Dyke to man mark once Kouassi got into the attacking half. On the other side, it really was a matter of like trying to overload and not let Rodman feel super steady on the ball. And some of that comes from like Carrie Abello picking up the yellow card, and you just do not want to risk Abello getting sent off in a 1v1. But like there was more, I think, concerted effort, at least from, the central midfield pairing, in making sure that Rodman was completely contained in a much more sort of like direct pressing way, whereas Sams's job was cutting off space off the ball, more so unless Kouassi really could start breaking in toward the box.
Yeah, I think it was Kouassi who was initially the attacking focal point. I think that there is a foul that Carrie Abello commits in around the 25th, 26th, 27th minute that she frankly probably could have gotten a yellow card on. She wins the ball, but has to go through Rodman from behind to get it. Yeah. And at that point, you started seeing the focus shifting. Now, right after that, Rosamund Kouassi picks up the first yellow of the game that I think was an amber card, that I think was physical enough and touchy enough and made no attempt to play the ball whatsoever. That was the sort of end of phase one of what was going on with Barbra Banda in the first half of the game. And what Barbra Banda was doing on the other side of the field for Orlando in attack was making Esme Morgan her little baby, her ragdoll that she could just toss around. In the third minute, Esme Morgan, who I think was a good defender at Man City and has plenty of potential and is on the right side of the age curve and yada, 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 is not really prepared to play as physically in this league. Certainly not against a Barbra Banda, who's maybe the most physically challenging striker you could face in the world right now. But Esme Morgan takes what is effectively an NFL lineman's swim move from Barbra Banda and is thrown to the side. McKeown comes in, sweeps up. Orlando ends up with a corner kick. And you just see as she's like adjusting her ponytail and getting her shit together, Esme Morgan realizing exactly the task that she has.
Yeah.
And Banda, who up against McKeown earlier this season, I think met something of a physical match, just spent the entire game drifting into Esme Morgan's space, looking for Esme Morgan and trying to physically dominate her.
Yeah, and it's reflected in everyone's in-game possession value. I mean, like the Esme Morgan is the worst performing player on the Spirit on the day. Like I think it's about negative 1.9, negative 0.2 roughly G plus that she generated. So she was a net negative for her squad. But despite all of that, because of what McKeown and to a certain extent Casey Kruger were doing, at least when Casey Kruger was playing deep, was to make sure that Banda that there was always somebody to sort of clean up after whatever Banda might do to Morgan. I mean, because again, Banda ends up with 0.12 XG on the day, and that includes the goal. So that you would say in a vacuum was an excellent team defensive performance against the number 1 or number 2 attacking player in the league. It's just that there was one moment where she really truly did get the better of the entire team defense, and from a pretty low XG chance as it was. But otherwise, with McKeown sweeping up behind, as you say, with Kingsbury, coming out of her area to close off angles, they did handle Banda pretty well. And in fact, Esme Morgan talked about it in the press conference. She's like, we executed our game plan pretty much the entire day, except for one moment. And that moment cost them.
Maybe this is where we get to the goal. Obviously, before that, Carrie Abello picks up a yellow card. Trinity Rodman beats her down the flank, and Abello just decides the yellow card is greater value for money than Trinity Rodman running free into space, and takes the yellow. But we get to the goal, and it's one of the times Casey Kruger, who'd been really pushed up all game, attempting to pin back Orlando, and to a large extent succeeding in pinning back Orlando. I think she's actually the component of this goal where you see the problem of sometimes trying to pin back an offense and a high press. As I was watching it again this morning, and we'll get to the Angelina shove. Once Angelina has won the ball, you see Casey Kruger almost level with Ali Watt in her own half, and that leaves Esme Morgan on an island against Barbra Banda. And Angelina just plays a beautiful, perfect ball over the top. And Esme Morgan, I'm sorry, just has no chance whatsoever. But there is no support defense because of this counter around. McKeown is covering runners from the other side, is spatially covering the center of the goal, isn't really in a bad position at any point. And Kruger is far too far behind the play to help with Esme Morgan. So we get this situation that I feel like Orlando intentionally targeted and designed, which is, can we get Banda alone with Esme Morgan? And maybe for the only chance in the game where that really does happen, Esme Morgan is undressed. A perfect little back heel touch. And I have to stress that when I was watching the broadcast, every version of this goal is basically slowed down on replay. From behind the goal, this move and this shot are happening at lightning speed. So you have a right-footed back heel touch, like a little Cruyff turn, and Esme Morgan just bites on that.
Yeah, hard.
And hard. And it speaks to Banda's pace. Few people can overrun the ball and make that turn at speed the way she can.
Yeah.
Again, sometimes you have the biggest X-dog, and Banda was that in this moment.
Heraldez took a risk at the beginning of this game. He brought in McKenna Morris. He benched Heather Stainbrook. You're putting on an attacker for a defender, essentially. And he used a pretty high, aggressive 4-2-4 structure to ensure that Hatch and Morris and Rodman and Kwasi would all be available to spring in transition pretty quickly and just try and gain numerical advantages high up the field. And Kruger is the wide defender sort of tasked with supporting all of that. Now, you can see the logic, because if you can maybe get Orlando off balance, or as you say, get them pinned back early, maybe you get an early goal and you can feel like you're a little bit more in control. But the risk is exactly what happened on the Banda goal. You are leaving too much space in behind you, and you are leaving yourself exposed. And I grant Heraldez that it is a calculated risk, but man, is that a really big risk when Barbra Banda is the one that will be springing those counters. You really have to play pretty perfectly in your opponent's half to avoid what happened. Because if what happens, then Orlando can just get stuck in, play deeper and deeper as the game goes on, and they're fine with that. As many of them said after the game, how fine they were with that, Hines has been training them to be comfortable and almost joyful off the ball as much as they are on it. And we've talked about so many times just how their off the ball positional discipline in that 4-4-2 mid block is pretty unbeatable. So
Yeah.
if you're behind, it's hard to find a way through. And like credit for Washington for trying. They put up a ton of shots and they did have the run of play pretty much wire to wire, but that doesn't mean much when the shots that you put up are really low percentage chances, which is again something like Kylie Strom even said, like we knew we were going to have to concede something. It was just a matter of what we were going to concede. And I think they were very happy to concede what they conceded. So yeah, it's funny how like for everything that Washington, I think, did well, Orlando had an answer.
You said this yesterday, and I think that this is actually right, which is Geraldes maybe overthought how to dominate this game, and he blinked, and Seb Hines didn't.
That's right. Yeah, to the point where, Carson Pickett didn't start and hasn't started all playoffs, a decision that maybe you and I in that position wouldn't have made, but Hines trusted his lineup. And I think in terms of the way that they applied their tactical, especially their out of possession rotations later in the game, like moving Ali Watt off the ball over to the left side for help defense with Abello to not expose Abello, was really brilliant. And again, exactly how the team has more or less operated, as they all told us all week. Like, they have their base structure, and then they can manipulate that base structure as needed relative to the opponent or the game state or what's happening in the match. But they always have those same core principles of off-ball defensive cohesion that they never waver from.
Haley Carter said something in our interview with her about the 2023 Orlando Pride occasionally looking to the sideline and needing to be a little bit joysticked by coaching and management. This is what we're seeing like much further on in the Seb Hines era, in the Seb Hines Haley Carter era, where you saw none of that. There was no need. Every player understood the assignment and closed down space. And so when the Banda chance finally does come along, it is the best chance of the game to that point. Like, we've made it 37 minutes into this game, and that Barbra Banda counter is the highest XG chance we've seen. And Washington's been able to, for all of the huffing and puffing, make essentially no headway in creating something that will challenge Anna Morehouse or the back line. So Banda beats Morgan and then slots near post. And I wonder if Kingsbury, she just sort of gets caught on the hop step and maybe is a little bit screened by Morgan, but the ball goes effectively to where her standing left leg had been before she prepared to make a save. So Banda fires that shot probably a quarter second before Kingsbury's ready for it, and it fills the space underneath her. In real time from behind the goal, I was standing with friend of the pod and just straight up baller Anna from Everything Bagels, and we just turned to each other and we're like, dear fucking God, are you kidding me? I'm dead.
Well, this is what's so crazy, and this is what really speaks to Aubrey Kingsbury kind of getting caught between no man's land in a way in defending that shot, is that it's not a high value post shot XG chance either. Like,
yeah,
Banda is putting Esme Morgan on skates and she's gaining the space that she needs, but like, it's not a super high value chance. Like, it's not like rifling toward upper 90 or just squeaking in at the near post. Like, it's, what is it? It's a 0.13 post shot XG value according to ASA's model against a 0.09 pre-shot XG chance. Like, more, and you can see, you could just see the look on Kingsbury's face when the ball goes in. Like, she knows.
That shot is a version of a striker just saying, I'm going for power no matter what. And look, it's going to be hard to catch this ball. There'll be a rebound. There could be a weird deflection. And she goes for power. And then, like, with the penalty kick taker's logic of, if I fire it right at the goalkeeper, surely the goalkeeper won't still be standing there. Mm-hmm. They'll have moved themselves. And frankly, that is what happens. Aubrey Kingsbury provides, I think, a solid target for Barbra Banda and then vacates the space required for that ball to get into the net. And I feel awful for Aubrey Kingsbury, who I think has had an incredible playoffs, but that one is hard. I know she took responsibility for it.
Yeah.
I think the responsibility is just as much on her teammates for allowing that shot to exist.
Yeah, and also on her coach. On her coach for like putting this game plan in place when you have a threat like Banda and frankly a passing threat like Angelina operate with that much freedom once they win the ball. And again, the Pride were arguably the best team. Actually, it's not arguable. It is fact. Like just in terms of like XG generated from shots that begin as transitions that start in the defensive half.
Yes.
There was nobody better than Orlando. Like when they win the ball in their own half and trigger a transition because of what Marta and to a certain extent what Adriana have done all season, it's almost impossible to beat them in those moments. And that is exactly how the goal comes about. Now, maybe we need to have a moment to discuss the controversy of why they won the ball in the first place.
Do you, referee Evan Davis, call a foul here?
And by which you mean the shove that Angelina puts on Lacey Santos.
Correct.
For the separation to receive the ball and then eventually launch the long ball to Banda.
Correct.
In real time, it looked pretty egregious. It looked like a very deliberate push off with such force that Santos hits the deck. That feels like an off-ball foul to me. Now, as I say that, I do not say that because to frame the officiating as jobbing Washington across the game, because the officiating was, I think, pretty inconsistent on both sides. There were calls that probably should have been called on each side that weren't, and you'll reference one in a minute. There were some maybe bitty fouls that were called on each side that maybe should have been let slide. And also, Orlando picked up twice the number of fouls that Washington did. It wasn't as though Orlando was getting a free pass in a lot of places. Having said all that, in this particular moment, I think Angelina probably should have been fouled for that push.
I remember thinking as I was watching it live, oh, wow, I'm in a really bad position to judge this. And Angelina seems to have gotten a lot of space quickly, which I think is fair. Having now watched this replay more times than I care to watch any two players colliding, I am of the mind that it is maybe a foul, but not a foul in the game as had been called up to that point. Like, I think that there had been enough physicality let go that this game's and the way it wasn't being called unevenly in terms of like distribution of fouls. Orlando came out and tried to get right in the grill of Washington and was getting right in the grill of Washington the whole time.
Yeah.
And the referees were largely letting it go. And so to a certain extent, I think some of the fault is on Lacey Santos for not coming in just as hard at Angelina. We talk about that moment when Carriabello picks up the yellow on Trinity Rodman. This was an ideal opportunity for Lacey Santos to grab a yellow against Angelina. Like, if she just looked up, seen Kruger upfield, seen Esme Morgan one-on-one, this is like a key opportunity to make a foul. And instead, Lacey Santos sort of gets like hip tight to Angelina. And I think Angelina, who has position to win the ball, probably takes a little too much advantage of that position with the shove, but is in the right to continue playing for and winning the ball. And Lacey Santos just kind of can't. She's a small player. Does that shove throw Tara McKeown? I don't think so. But it throws Lacey Santos. And so I understand if the call is not made on the field in that moment and the play is allowed to go on, that I don't think there's an opportunity. I think VAR handled it perfectly. They looked at it and said there is no clear and obvious error there because the shove was visible enough that if you were going to call it, you could have called it right there on the field. And the shove wasn't cut and dry enough because Lacey Santos is also trying to body Angelina.
Yeah.
So is this 50-50? Is this... I think it's excessive from Angelina, but I think once the play is allowed to continue, there isn't a really viable VAR call to bring it back. And by the way, we will get this exact moment replicated with the Hal Hirschfeld yellow.
Yeah, you want to talk about that? This is actually a moment where you can kind of point toward for Washington fans being like, you guys dodged a bullet too here. And, we have a referee inside ASA who we often talk to about officiating. And I asked him what he thought about the officiating of this game. And he's like, it's never good when the only goal in the game is that controversial. And what I infer from that is that the officiating in general was just really inconsistent.
Yeah.
And I think each side got away with stuff, and each side probably were unnecessarily punished for stuff.
If you're asking me what I think the most controversial call of the game is, and again, I don't think VAR can go back and correct it, I actually think it's that Hal Hirschfeld doesn't get sent off for a very late, very high challenge where Studs do catch Angelina right at knee height. Hal Hirschfeld makes Studs contact with Angelina's thigh, and does so after Angelina has clearly touched and won the ball. The referee gives a yellow for this foul. I'm fine with that. But if that had just been a foul, I think VAR could have reasonably stepped in and said, that's dangerous play. That's a red card. It's not about Hirschfeld's intent here. She's just super late, studs out, makes contact. If you want to see it as she's at the last second trying to pull her studs away from the contact, she just doesn't succeed all the way in doing that.
Right.
So I think, again, VAR looks at that yellow card, and I can't remember whether they can overrule yellow cards or not. But because it's not a clear and obvious foul or a clear and obvious mistake because the yellow card is issued, where I think a red card would have been totally appropriate. And in that moment, Washington could have felt truly jobbed. But also, I think these are calls right at the margin. Orlando forced the referee into having a bad game.
Yeah.
Forced the referee to be more aggressive with the whistle than I think any official wants to be in a final. And I think that is another edge gained at the margins in their game plan. And frankly, a naivete in Washington's game plan. Barcelona men's side, women's side for years, one of the knocks on them has always been they're too in the ref's face when they aren't getting calls. They're soft, quote unquote. I don't think Washington is soft. I think Geraldes has some naivete about what this league is if he thinks he's going to get these kinds of calls to bail him out.
Maybe he didn't talk about it one way or the other because he didn't talk about anything in the post-match presser, Anytime anybody asked him a question about anything, whether it was about tactics, whether it was about reflecting on the season, emotions, whatever, he was just like, this isn't the right time to talk about it. His press conference was 2 minutes long. And I get that, you're feeling pretty in shock and vulnerable because you just lost a final mere minutes before. But, there were things to talk about. Case in point, Aubrey Kingsbury and Esby Morgan offered pretty rich and thoughtful and thorough analyses of what happened in the game. I think if you want to be aggrieved at the performance of Alyssa Nichols and her team, I think you can be. I just don't think you can be through the lens of they had it in for one team or another.
No, it's certainly not, because Washington won a lot of free kicks in pretty dangerous areas.
Right.
It wasn't like Washington wasn't getting fouls, as you cited earlier.
Right.
A team that draws 16 fouls in a game is not getting jobbed by an official.
Yeah, or it's not getting a preferential treatment. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, let's go to the Ashley Hatch chance turned Tara McKeown chance right before the half. Yeah. In your mind, is this the best chance that Washington had to score all game?
I mean, certainly by the numbers, it would suggest that. Depends on how you want to analyze it. A Hatch corner that rattles off the post feels like it might be the bigger piece, but it's a corner header from a fair distance out, relatively speaking. So the rebound that drops to McKeown that she just can't turn on and try and get past Morehouse, I think, is a threat. And it's just, again, sort of this momentary lapse where Orlando didn't have everybody covered during the corner sequence, and Washington couldn't capitalize through no real fault of their own. It's a tough shot from where McKeown is taking it. In terms of the shot itself, it's a great chance. And that is also kind of the underlying story of the match, that, by an expected points model that you would apply to StatsBomb's model, which, StatsBomb's XG is basically in line with FBref and ASA. Washington should have won 2.2 points from this game based on the number of chances that they put up. Again, 1.8 XG on the day. But they just couldn't find clean angles to hit the goal mouth. Negative 1.3 finishing value that they were adding to their chances. And some of that is what Orlando's doing. Some of that is luck. But if McKeown is able to get her hips turned and move that ball toward the far post rather than have it sail wide, it's 1-1 at half. And then Kwasi's header, which is taken from a great spot off of Rodman's cross just after the second half starts.
Very much so.
She just shoots it right at Anna Morehouse. And it ends up being Anna Morehouse said that was like the one moment where she felt a little nervy in terms of saving shots, but it was right at her, so it had a little juice on it, but it was not trying to travel away from the keeper. So you just have better finishing on those two chances, and Washington's potentially 2-1 up right at the beginning of the second half, and it's a different story.
I feel about the McKeown chance that in a disappointing way, this is like just why XG matters over the course of seasons, because McKeown scored a goal she probably shouldn't have scored. McKeown scores against Bay through 4 defenders and a screened Katie Rowland with her team down at a crucial moment. And that's a low XG chance. In this game, the ball falls to her off the post, 4 yards from goal, and it catches her on the bounce up, which is so much harder to make good contact on.
Yeah.
Anytime you are taking a volley, you want that ball falling onto your foot, not rising up to it. And she just sort of gets caught awkwardly. And so it almost isn't a shooting opportunity by the time the ball gets to her, because it's like thigh high. And she just kind of can't get her legs out from underneath her. But again, the XG gods giveth and the XG gods taketh away in this particular moment. And I'm sure McKeown would like a different opportunity to strike that ball, but I think you put any player in the world with that ball bouncing up at the speed it was bouncing up, and that's a really, really hard finish. So I think the XG gets it right in one way of looking at it. The move is maybe for McKeown to take a step back and more time, but I think if she's going to try to strike the ball when she strikes the ball, I don't think there's a version of that shot that's going in the net without something wonky happening. That said, it is on paper their best chance of the game.
Mm-hmm.
The Kwasi chance after the half, for my money, is actually their best chance of the game. And it's a hell of a header from Kwasi. Yeah. How good has Kwasi been in your mind since joining Washington?
For somebody who hasn't scored for Washington, she's been pretty damn incredible. Like as a node of final ball service and like progression from deeper parts of midfield, like she is rapidly making the case for being one of the best swingers in the league. And
I think that's right.
was the perfect solution that they needed during the summer window, because they needed a left winger and Ashley Hatch wasn't going to be that. And she has been the savior of a lot of Washington's offensive performances since losing Uli Madasar and Croy Bethune. She has been incredibly impressive, and again had like a pretty good game, all things considered, against Orlando. And that was like the one area where maybe we thought there could be some advantage Washington's way, because how was Corey Dyke going to handle her? And the answer was that she would have Ali Watt helping. And Ali Watt just wouldn't be an offensive node the way that she was in the semifinal, which led to one of the goals against Kansas City. So
that's right.
And also, like, let's take a moment to talk about Ali Watt, who a player that has not ever cemented herself in the 11 all year. She's gotten a lot of playing time off the bench. She's often been the super sub, but over the last few weeks has claimed the right wing spot over Julie Doyle and has basically done anything that's asked of her, whether it's breaking in transition and hitting cutbacks and crosses for her teammates, whether it's scoring goals, whether it's playing defense on either wing as a supportive tool for either fullback. She's just been everywhere. And it's very cool to see. And I just wonder what this might mean for her in 2025. Like, is she now finally going to take a starting spot by the horns? Because at least in this small sample of October and November, she has been one of Orlando's best players on each side of things, and is a big reason why both Kouassi and in the second half Rodman did not have a lot of opportunities to get free and get 1v1 the way that they want to. They just, like, Orlando just would not let their fullbacks get isolated. It was just like we were refusing to let Abello and Dyke get exposed at any point. And we're comfortable giving away the middle because Lacey Santos didn't have a great game, and they knew that their center backs could handle it. Like, yeah.
Absolutely. I wonder if we aren't discussing currently, like, two of the breakout stars of the 2025 NWSL season.
I mean, it's a short sample. You know, this often happens where, like, in the stretch run and in the playoffs, somebody emerges who really puts the team on their back or becomes a real key piece of their success. And
totally,
that doesn't necessarily translate to future success, but at least in this short sample, Ali Watt is someone that we should be paying attention to next year.
Yeah, I think if you ask me to pick between the two of them, Kouassi is the player who I think is the clear breakout candidate for next year. But Ali Watt's put together some really incredible games, and we shouldn't, particularly on this Orlando side, underestimate the value she's offering the team with her defensive work rate.
Yeah.
Like, she was crucial.
In the second half, we talk about bend, don't break defense a lot in the context of game state, and Washington really was hitting the gas hard to try and get an equalizer, putting up massive amounts of shots and basically living in Orlando's defensive third. Emily Sam said after the game that they wanted to try and pin Washington back, and you could actually see at the beginning of the second half how much they were actually beginning to counterpress in Washington's half and trying to win the ball back high up. But Washington was able to expose that, which is what leads to the Kouassi chance. And Sam said, like, we did not feel comfortable. Like, we knew we were going to have to defend a lot, but like we didn't feel comfortable doing it in the second half, which I thought was a very interesting comment. And at least in my mind, spoke to the idea that no team really wants to be defending for that much time, regardless of how well they do it or whether they want to do it. But despite all the shots, despite all the pressure that Washington was pouring on, 0.07 XG per shot at the end of the day. You want to put up nearly 2 XG on a team, that opposing team will be very happy to let you do it if those are the quality of chances that you keep throwing in their direction. Again, like Kylie Strom said, you're going to concede something. It was just a matter of what we were going to concede, and this is what you would want to concede in those situations. So what do you make of Sam saying that Orlando defensively didn't feel comfortable in the second half? Did that bear out while watching the game?
Yeah, absolutely. What is interesting about that comment is it's very honest. And I think that players, it shows a level of, like, it actually speaks to another thing I think Orlando's done well. It speaks to a humility in spite of the records they've been able to achieve, in spite of winning the double. It speaks to an honesty and a humility about the way in which the game actually went, because no one wants to defend for that long. And if you wanted to knock Seb Hines in this game, it's that he didn't make defensive adjustments fast enough. Like, he kept Carrie Abello on, and I think really put her at risk, particularly as we saw the Rodman Kouassi overloads starting to happen on the same flank.
Yeah, right.
Like, he really, really put Carrie Abello in a bad place.
Carson Pickett comes on in the 86th minute.
Exactly. It's
so strange.
And again, Abello has a great game considering how long she is playing on a yellow. But if she picks up another foul, it's just a lot of risk to take.
When you don't have to do it because you have such an elite replacement off the bench.
Totally. But squad cohesion was clearly important to the Orlando Pride and Seb Hines.
Yeah, but there's just a certain point. Like, maybe you let Abello, like, play to the 60th, but there is just a moment where you have to say, like, squad cohesion be damned. Like, we have a game state that we need to address, you know?
If we want to knock Geraldes for taking a bad bet and losing, I think we could say here Hines took a really risky bet and won.
I think that's true. And if there's a bad bet that that Heraldez took really shouldn't have and did get punished for it. It's that Trinity Rodman played the entire game when she was very obviously not 100% fit. It's maybe a more interesting question there because who are you going to replace her with that could match her for any level offensively? Like, does Courtney Brown come in and try and play wide? Do you bring Brittany Radcliffe in as a replacement winger? Like, even an injured Rodman is probably pound for pound better than either of those players. But it was, but also like they didn't make Orlando's job harder by allowing Rodman to play hurt. And Rodman even admits, like, yeah, I was feeling it. I was in a lot of pain and I could have pulled myself and I didn't. And she was speaking in tones of regret that she and Heraldez didn't make the decision to pull her either at halftime or early in the second half.
I mean, hard to knock it when she's also the source of the Kouassi header.
Right.
Like, you know, it's not like Trinity Rodman wasn't contributing. She was struggling to find ways to contribute more, but it's not like she wasn't doing anything.
No, and she really did try, especially in those last 10, 15 minutes, was really throwing everything at the wall. Yeah. But it felt like you're just like, I'm going to ignore how much pain I'm in. I'm going to let adrenaline take over, which isn't great either. But it is sheer force of will that you are trying to make something happen given the state of your physical condition.
For Orlando, Strom and Sams just have such a deep understanding of space.
Yep.
And credit to Angelina and Haley McCutcheon for doing a great job of trying to compensate for Carriabello's overloaded flank.
Mm-hmm.
Credit to Ali Watt for dropping super deep at times and contributing defensively. Credit to 38-year-old Marta.
Literally everywhere. Which is also a funny thing. Like, it is a demonstration of just how incredible Marta is, but it also kind of underlines how tough a time Orlando had offensively all game too. That Orlando, you use Marta. Hines has tended to use Marta as the free player to go find pockets of space to get on the ball, and a lot of times she was dropping really deep, almost becoming a 6 to try and receive the ball. She was moving on either wing, helping out both offensively and defensively. But Orlando, like, let's give Washington some credit here. Yes, like Morgan struggled against Banda at times, but like Orlando did not have any good looks at goal basically all day. And Marta is sort of is a metonym for that fact, in that she had to be all over the place trying to get on the ball and make something happen. Jason Anderson, our buddy over at USA Today and Pro Soccer Wire, he said something to me before the press conference started, and I saw later that he had also posted it on Blue Sky. Watching Emily Sams read intentions early and cut play out is like watching someone who lives 3 seconds in the future. And I think that's right.
Yes. What a great description. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I actually felt on the other side of the ball, Tara McKeown had exactly the same game.
I agree.
Yeah. There is a chance toward the end of the game that Banda has snuffed out before it even evolves into a chance, because Tara McKeown, who is one of the best ball progressors on the day, one of the best on-ball value players on the day for Washington, still doing all the defensive work as well.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, but Emily Sams she won the NWSL Defender of the Year award. I think the numbers we look at don't all the way bear that out. I think the performance she gave in the final fully justifies this selection as a worthy recipient of this award.
And when we say we didn't necessarily think it bore that out, it doesn't mean we don't think she was one of the best defenders this year. She was. But this is also why, defensive data is still behind attacking data by quite a bit. But no, in terms of her off-ball positioning and the way that she bossed Washington's attack basically from minute one without actually having to do a whole lot, was really, really impressive. And it's also a reminder of why Naomi Girma and or Tierna Davidson have some competition now. And now center back depth for the U.S. women's national team is pretty interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing that defined, and maybe just to sort of put a bow on it, the thing that was tough for Washington, you saw a lack of patience in what shot selection ended up being.
Yeah, I think that's
as
fair.
They continued to pile on. And I think that also is where Sams and Strom and the entire defense deserve a lot of credit. The sense that we're not going to get a better look than the one I've got right now, so I should take the one right now, was what their defense imposed. The lack of seams available to be found resulted in Washington killing a lot of their own possessions with bad shots, with like premature shots. Ashley Hatch has a ball that falls to her in the box. It's one of the rare times that there's some separation to be had. And instead of like taking the touch and looking up and seeing if there's anyone to pass to, just snatches at it and it rolls softly to Anna Morehouse. And I completely understood where Hatch was with that in that moment. It was relatable, but it was also like credit to Orlando's defense for making you think that all you have available to you is like half a sight at goal.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the suffocating way in which Orlando diminished the amount of time Washington in their minds had to create that I think wins this game. That said, for Sam's, there is nothing harder than playing without the ball in soccer for long stretches of time. Like, it's fine. Finding a goal when you're down one, very, very difficult. But the mental anguish and the physical stress of playing without the ball for what ended up being basically every minute after the Banda goal, it's extraordinary that they held on. That is really, really asking a lot of the bend part of your bend don't break.
And again, despite the XG per shot value being so low, which is what we use to say how good you were defensively, Orlando, like the 2.2 expected points that Washington should have won, especially when you consider just a little bit better finishing from McKeown and Kouassi on either side of halftime. And Washington can feel not hard done by necessarily, but can feel like maybe there was an opportunity missed. It's why my thought about this game is that Orlando deserved to win, but Washington did not deserve to lose.
Well said.
Yeah.
That's right. The Washington Spirit have a really bright future ahead.
Yes, they do.
This team may have gotten to this final a year early, and there's no guarantee they'll be back. But if you wanted me to place money on a team that I think will be back to multiple finals for the rest of this decade, I think I'm not going to look a lot further than the Washington Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very good team with a lot of good pieces that they were without. I think if they had Croy Bethune, Ule Sarr, and Andy Sullivan, this is a completely different strategy session for Orlando to figure out this game.
Yeah.
And this is advantage Washington in ways that it wasn't necessarily going into this final.
Yeah, despite the fact that Heraldez probably got his game plan a little bit wrong at the end of the day, and maybe you read that through the lens of results, he's still a very good coach. And I am pulling up right now what Washington's contract situation is going into 2025 here. You have Croy Bethune locked up for 2 more years plus a club option for a third. You have Ashley Hatch with the same deal. Hal Hirschfeld, 2 more years before free agency. Kingsbury, 1 more year plus an option. You have Rose Kouassi for 3 more years. Casey Kruger for 2. Tara McKeown for 3. I could go on. Like, this is a young team that is going to be around for a while, and the only real decision that you're going to have to make is about Rodman and Sarr for next year because they're free agents in a year's time. And if I'm Michelle Kang, I am attempting to get those players extended in this offseason at the very latest in the summer window next year. So if the core of your group is this young, this good, and are going to be around this long, you're going to get more bites of the apple here. Like, Washington Spirit is not going away, and they will not be going away quietly.
Moreover, for the Patreon sickos, we have a great conversation with members of the Washington Spirit data and analytics team.
Because this is Thanksgiving week, we are going to be releasing 2 Patreon bonus episodes. This will be our last main feed. We're doing a lot of main feed because of the championship coming up. So the Patreon subscribers will have a little Thanksgiving treat with a couple of episodes to enjoy this week. So look forward to those.
And if you're a Spirit-concerned listener, I feel like hearing about the depths of knowledge building that the Spirit are trying to do as an organization will be a soothing balm to the butt hurtness and the possible hangover you have, Maddie, to the possible to the possible hangover you Spirit fans have going forward. I think your team is in excellent shape.
Excellent shape.
Anything else you want to say about this final before we wrap up?
Only to say that it was a great week in Kansas City. It was great to and spend time with a lot of members of your family, Eric, who are all really, really lovely people and very generously opened up their home to us. It was great to meet fans. It was great to meet so many of you guys, to meet Anna, to meet Dan, to meet Joel, to meet Peyton, to meet Maddie. It's really wonderful to know that our listeners are as awesome as we always assumed they were.
Yeah, very much.
Really great conversations, really, really great hangs. It just made the experience really, really great. And I will also shout out, the Kansas City Current for putting on a great event, hosting a great event. Jeff Husted, who runs PR for Kansas City, was running points on a lot of things all weekend. The stadium was beautiful, hosted, I thought, a great atmosphere. Kansas City Current supporters who were hosting events all weekend welcomed us with open arms. To Danielle Russell specifically for helping us to play some small part of that was really, really great. Served us great food at Block 15.
Yeah, Blue Crew.
Before the game.
Blue Crew, Tealgate was great.
Yeah, KC Blue Crew. Yeah, just a really great experience. We hope that if, we certainly will want to repay the favor if the championship gets hosted at BMO Stadium in Los Angeles in the coming years. We would really like that. It would be nice to not have to travel for one of these things. But we will certainly show you a good time whenever the game comes to Los Angeles.
All right, Evan, I'm going to drop something for you that's last piece of news. As of during this record, Alyssa Nair has announced that these last two national team friendlies will be her final friendlies. She is retiring from the national team.
We were aware that there was going to be a national team retirement announcement coming today. We did not know who that was going to be. There was a lot of speculation. I was assuming that it would be something more anodyne than this, but this is very interesting. And I don't think that it's all that unexpected given where Nair is in her career and how, we know that this is probably as the best time to pass the mantle on. So I think this is very positive for both the national team, and it will give us an opportunity next week on Main Feed when we talk about the friendlies to discuss Nair's career as a whole.
Yeah.
Which I think is good for us because we don't always get to talk about Nair in the most positive of lights, just given recent performances. But it's a career that must be celebrated.
Yeah. Alyssa Nair has, 2 World Cups, a gold medal. She's done some shit.
Yep.
And I just think it's great to see players thinking about the organization and the health of the organization in total. There's a selflessness to this that is right in line with everything Alyssa Nair has ever done. So kudos to you, Alyssa. Thanks for a lot of great memories.
And thank you, XOG listeners, for all your memories. Please remember to rate us, review us, follow us, rate us 5 stars if you haven't done so already. Drop us a review in the podcatcher of your choice if you have the opportunity to do so. Tell all your friends about us. Email us at expectedowngoals. That's the letter expectedowngoals@gmail.com. If you believe we've made an own goal, follow us on all social channels at xowngoals. That's the letter xowngoals. And we are officially a Blue Sky family. So we will be back for you Patreon heads twice this week for the holiday week. Wherever you are going to be celebrating, I hope you are enjoying yourself and you are staying safe. So we will speak to you on Main Feed next week.
Yep. Enjoy. Have a great holidays, guys. Bye.
Bye.